Dwarves never cease to surprise me. I've met a lot of them, actually, during my travels through the realms, and I'm yet to find a marketplace without at least one vendor of this people. I never thought of them as being capable of majestic feats, especially not now, in these times after the fall. Do I pity them for their fate? I think I do. Dwarven holds used to be a thing of true majesty. Unassuming from the outside, their true nature would be revealed the moment you were to step foot through their gates. Either through circumstance or continuous choice, Dwarven holds are ever expanding, you know? I've heard rumors that the most ancient of their kingdoms would reach down to the very roots of the earth itself. For they can never dig too deep in search for their riches. Or can they? Lotsum set his mug down with a satisfied grin. Nothing better under the mountain than to reward one's toil with a swig of malt beer. He shuffled around on his stool to sit a little more comfortable, eyeing the rest of the foodstuffs left on their makeshift table. The warm light of the lanterns above filled the new stollen they had carved out over the last few weeks, and drenched it in a warm glow which he had always viewed as being rather cozy, even here so far from the crackling fireplaces of their hearths. Most of the others had already moved back to the elevator of the shaft that would lift them back home, except for one other. "Lost in thought, Lot?" Uhtram asked from across the crate they used as their table. He was burly, even for a dwarf, and his beard flowed in waves down his chest. His hair was of a dark brown shade, although there were a few grey streaks that snuck their way into his mane, which came as no surprise, given that he was roughly half a century older than Lotsum. "Just enjoying the fruits of our labor, Trum," Lotsum replied, reaching out and snatching a sausage slice from Uhtram's plate, before theatrically putting it in his mouth. Uhtram tried to put on a grim expression, but the mischievous glimmer in his eyes betrayed him. "Enjoy 'em while you can. There's still a lot of work left to be done." He tapped on the map they had laid out to underline his point. Uhtram was right. The discovery of this new tunnel network had been as exciting as it had been strenuous, and supporting the tunnels they explored had been proven to be a lot more difficult than the prospectors originally thought. Uhtram grabbed his mug and murmured into it. "Not to mention all of the accidents." And with that, his face really grew dark. Lotsum leaned forward and fixed his eyes on the part of the map that was still white, folding his hands on the crate as he did so. There had been some incidents with people going missing in the last week. Scouting parties that had been tasked with mapping the tunnels ahead. Suppliers that had never arrived at their waypoints. Dwarves that, separated from their groups, were never seen again. First they thought that there had been some cave-ins or collapses that cut them off or swallowed them whole. The walls of this network were brittle enough for accidents to happen, but there was never any rubble to be found by the ones that looked for their missing peers. The scariest part of it all, however, was the place of the most recent disappearances, of dwarves going missing in parts of the mines that had already been cleared and explored. Lotsum shuddered and looked to his friend. He wanted to say something, but froze. "You alright?" Lotsum cut him off with an outstretched hand and listened. He looked past Uhtram before meeting his gaze again. "You hear that?" Uhtram now listened in as well. There it was again. A quiet whistling? They didn't know how to describe the sound they just heard, only that it came from the direction of the caves that were yet to be explored. A slight chill ran through the mine, leaving the lanterns to briefly flicker. Uhtram turned on his stool, both of them now looking in the same direction. First, there was nothing. Then, at the end of the tunnel, a lantern went out. Then another. Then another. And the dwarves realized that they were about to find out what caused all the disappearances over the last weeks. "Run!" Lotsam yelled, springing from a stool and grabbing Uhtram's elbow to pull him around. Suddenly, the whole mine was filled with the noise of chitter and possibly hundreds of legs moving from the depths. Lotsam did not dare turn around, his mind already envisioning all the horrors that the children's tale spoke of would lurk in the dark of the mountains. They panted, their bodies not ready for such a run. Lotsam's muscles started aching, but his fear drove him on. He looked to his side. Uhtram didn't fare any better. If anything, the older dwarf looked like he was about to collapse. Lotsam grabbed his arm again to pull him forward, in no way accepting that he would leave his friend behind. The elevator, their only hope to escape the monsters that were hunting them, wasn't far. They turned the corner so fast that Lotsam almost hit the wall, not wanting to lose any momentum. He already started seeing dark spots from the exhaustion, and could only imagine what Uhtram must feel. "Lord!" Uhtram wheezed his name. "Lord, you need to—" "No!" Lotsam threw a stern glance over his shoulder, looking his friend in the eyes. "We are both gonna make it," he yelled, feeling another surge of energy within him. This wouldn't be a tragic tale that the bards would sing around the gleaming fire, of Uhtram the selfless hero who sacrificed himself for the life of his companion. Oh no, they would both make it home. They had to. Finally, the gates of the elevator came in sight. The crew operating it was already frantically fiddling with the levers controlling it, probably having already caught wind of the commotion. He yelled out to the dwarves at the elevator, frantically waving his right arm. They looked at him, one of them making a move in his direction. But then, they caught a glimpse of what was after them. They yelled in shock themselves now, and frantically opened the steel cage that was their elevator. The chief engineer ushered his younger apprentices into the apparatus as he frantically made some last adjustments. Lotsam pulled his friend further to his side, both of them only moments from reaching the cage, the crew cheering and waving for them to move faster. The white-haired chief engineer completed his adjustments and pulled a hammer from his belt as he now too rushed toward the gates of the elevator, the machine roaring to life. Lotsam and Uhtram didn't stop as they hurled themselves to safety, crashing into the back of the cage with full force. The engineers then pulled in their superior, who in his last act on the bottom of the mine, swung his hammer down on the counterweight around the framework, freeing the cage from its ballast. The elevator suddenly shot upwards, throwing all of the dwarves off balance. Through the metallic mesh that the cage was made of, Lotsam could now finally catch a glimpse of the horrors that hunted them. It was a horde of dozens of spiders, the smaller ones probably reaching to his hip, with the largest ones surely twice as tall as he stood himself. The chittering of their mandibles filled the caves, as the stakes of hundreds of legs echoed from the walls like a thunderstorm. With horror, he realized how close they had been to catching up. As they were being pulled away, the spiders screamed in frustration and anger, a sound so unnatural that it shook all of them to their core. Only as the lights of the mine grew dimmer with the distance they laid between them and their pursuers, did Lotzim allow himself a moment of rest. He looked around. The engineers tended to their chief, who looked like he broke his ankle when leaping into the elevator. Utram rested panting against the mesh wall, blood running down his forehead from when they crashed into the cage. But all of them were alive, and Lotzim allowed himself a whimper of relief. As the minutes passed, he thought that he should better make note of what they encountered on the map he carried on him. Feeling for it on his jerkin, it was nowhere to be found. He slumped back against the wall. He left it on the crate as they started running for their lives. "All the same," he mumbled. "It's not like anyone's ever gonna use it again."